Hey class, let's talk about this idea called the photo series. Here's a uh, series of three images from a larger series called In the American West, captured and created by Richard Avedon. And if you take a look at these three images, um, there's going to be certain things about them that give you an idea of why they would belong together in a what's called a series. But let's rewind for a second. What is it? What is a photo series to begin with? A photo series is a body of images related in a common idea, theme, story, or concept. Each image contributes to the overall idea as a whole. In a sense, you all have been creating your own sort of mini photo series every time you create or submit a body of work, which is an assignment. Say, for example, you were doing your action photography assignment, and all of those shots, the common idea for all of them were capturing action in some form or another. So, in a sense, that particular assignment was a series. Now, if you were to capture that entire assignment in a skate park in Venice Beach, then that would make that series a little bit more specific because now we're not only dealing with action, but we're dealing with action of skateboarders at a particular location. So, again, a photo series is really a body of images that all kind of work together to create or uh, provide or depict an idea as a whole. So going back to those three images, how do you create images that look like they all belong in a series? Like how do they all what what are the key elements in putting a series together to make them all look like they belong as one whole collection of work? There's something called convention. A series can use similar elements, each photograph to unify the images. So while it's not necessary to always have all of these elements consistent in every single shot, the more you have commonalities throughout each image, the more they would appear to belong as one body of work. So if you look at these three images, uh, what elements give you an idea that they sort of kind of belong together? Well, obviously they're all in black and white. That helps. Putting them just kind of looking at it that way. And then they have this sort of framing around them, right? That's really from the negative. These were all shot with a large format camera with a large pieces of film, and the film itself has these borders, these black borders. So the photographer Richard Avedon decided to print the border of the film also on the image on the print. So they're kind of already framed very similarly. And then if you look at the background, it's a plain white background. Just looking at those three things, they're black and white. They have this interesting border around them, and the background is white. And that already is sort of kind of bringing them together, unifying them in this collection. But also the subject matter. Okay? These aren't your business portraits that we're taking here. They're not actor headshots either. It's not fashion also. It's a certain type of subject that he is photographing for this series, right? Let's break this down. So, one convention you could do to make your series more unified would be having similar lighting condition, and that's what he was able to achieve in every single one of these photographs. He photographed them in an open shade situation. Okay, so these are all the same lighting condition, different location, different subject matter, probably maybe similar time of day, but he looked for an open shade situation, and he actually brought his own white seamless paper, which he used as the background. So it's looking as if every one of these subjects stepped into a studio. They were in a studio, but they were an outdoor studio, a portable one, and he just found the open shade situation and put the white seamless paper behind them to create this look. Okay, so all the lighting conditions the same in all of them. The background's the same as I talked about. So white seamless paper. The depth of field. Now you may choose to shoot something, really deep depth of field to make everything consistent. That's also a choice to keep things unified in a series. Subject matter. Richard Avedon took pictures of people out in the West from a period of 1979, 1984, and he picked, I would say, maybe your ordinary people, and I would even think he picked the forgotten people, the people who are maybe marginalized and overlooked. So those were his subjects. He used black and white film, and he used what's called a large format camera. It's not as small as your DSLR. It's actually a really, really large camera in order to produce a very large negative, because these images were printed, larger than life, 6-7 feet high. All right, so that was his choice of camera. So he applied all of that to this series, and the more convention you apply to your series, the more that they will appear to belong together. Let me show you. It so happens that this series is actually available to see. At least 10 prints are available to be seen in person at the Gagosian Gallery in Beverly Hills. And it's free admission to get there. You can go to their website and find out more information on their hours. But let me show you a little preview of what it looks like, especially for those of you who are outside of California or outside of Southern California and you can't get to this. These prints are amazing, and if you ever get a chance to see this, it's not every day you can see an Avedon print from this series, because they're, first of all, they're really huge, as I said, larger than life, and it's not something that you could get in the museum casually. This is a very well-known series, and a well-known piece of work by Richard Avedon. So let's play this video. I'm going to read a little description of what this series is about while you watch this video. So to produce in the American West, Avedon spent 5 years journeying through 21 western states, photographing more than 1,000 people as they went about their daily lives. For the original exhibition, he selected 125 images from the thousands taken and chose just 10 to print at a monumental scale, larger than the oversized editioned work. Avoiding the landscape imagery that had defined the West in earlier photography and in the popular imagination, he decided to present the region through images of its inhabitants. The result is a key achievement within Avedon's oeuvre and a defining moment for contemporary portraiture. In the American West avoids both visual cliché and conventional idealization to achieve an arresting quality. Replying to the sometimes outraged responses elicited by this daring project, Avedon claimed, "It's trivializing to make someone look sage, noble, or even conventionally beautiful when the real thing is so much crazier, contradictory, and therefore fascinating." The larger-than-life scale of the prints on view in Beverly Hills contributes to their considerable visual presence and implicitly declares the humanity of their subjects. Powerfully realized, these images of specific personalities were also enormously influential on subsequent portrait photography. So as you see in this video, one patron was walking past one of the prints, and it's clearly larger than her. These are really grand scale sized prints. And looking at the detail as you walk up to it, it's really amazing how the image still, it really holds up very well. These images were taken with a large format film camera, and the size of the negatives were as big as an 8 by 10 piece of paper. Your regular maybe U.S. legal size paper, 8.5 by 11, something to that effect. Really large negative. And as I said, I feel like his subjects were definitely people maybe on the fringes of our society, the forgotten ones, people who lived in the flyover states. Photographed between 1979 and 1984. And here is what you could see, his sort of corrections that he would make in the darkroom. What we would do now in Photoshop. So, if you're in the area and you have the time to spare to go to the Gagosian Gallery in Beverly Hills, I highly recommend you go to this exhibit. It isn't very often this series is out there. Whenever it is available, it's not always going to be also available in Los Angeles. I think the last time this was up anywhere near me was in San Francisco, and that was several years ago. So I was lucky enough to see some of it while I was traveling in Norway a couple of years ago. I had no idea some of these images, not all 10, but maybe I think a couple were at some gallery in Norway, and we kind of detoured our plans that day and just went straight to the gallery to see the work. So I had to go all the way across the world in order to see some of those prints, but now it's actually here in the same town, and so I'm definitely going to go check it out. It's exhibiting now until the 18th of this month, so I highly recommend you go out there and check it out. It's the Gagosian Gallery in Beverly Hills. It's free admission. For more information, go to their website, and hopefully you guys can see it. Now, I just talked about how there's a lot of convention that was placed in the work, like in terms of how everything is laid out with the lighting, background, format, it's in black and white, etc. It doesn't mean you have to follow all of those conventions in order for something to be a series. In fact, if your idea is so strong, you could transcend all of these conventions if the idea is very, like I said, if it's such a very impactful concept that you don't have to necessarily follow every single one of these things to make it look like they belong together. Let me show you an example of what I'm talking about. A photographer by the name of Natsumi Hayashi. She is known for photographing herself, self-portraits, while she's levitating. Here is an example of her in Vietnam in what looks like to be a garment factory. So once again, this is the photographer taking self-portraits of her levitating in these interesting situations. It's interesting. Maybe a garment factory isn't so interesting, but her levitating in it is interesting. And notice the lighting condition in here. It's indoors. It's just going to be the factory lighting with some window light. Then she's at another location, and it's a hospital, and different location altogether, and still levitating. Okay. Here she is, and she's looking quite different in every single shot. Different outfit. The other one looked like she was wearing a wig. And now here she is. It looks like to be some sort of park, and there's people all around her. and she's levitating. The idea is so strong, the lighting conditions are so different in each one, and her outfit's so different, but yet they all still belong together. Here she is in another look in an interior location. It looks like she's in, I think, a restaurant, because if you see some people in the back there at a table. Think about the composition also in every single shot. She's applying composition, as you should as well whenever you're taking a picture. This is a framing composition. She's being framed by these elements that are in front and around her. And that actually looks like a frame. It looks like the frame of the mirror, if that's a mirror that she's photographing. That is her too. And look, it's at night. This is a night shot. And look how different she's looking here. So, what is the commonality out of all of these? And I want to stop it here too, because this looks different from a lot of them because she's all blurry there. But it's still the same concept. It's her levitating. The commonalities are, it's her in every single shot, and she's levitating. And that's pretty much it. Everything else is very different. Lighting condition is different. Her framing is different. Her location is different. Her outfit's different. Even this one, she's not frozen in time. She is actually a still blur. So these are all action shots, right? These are all, most of them except for this one, this one, all of these are shot how? If we're thinking about action photography and you want to freeze something in time, what is the technique to do so? Let's start with your shutter. When you're thinking action photography, you should be thinking your shutter. Are you shooting with a slow shutter or are you shooting with a fast shutter speed in order to freeze the action? Hopefully you said high shutter speed. Hint, that's going to be in the final, okay? Action shots. What's the technique for shooting freezing action? So high shutter speed in order to freeze the action. In this case, the action is her jumping and catching her in midair. Now, if most of hers and most of her work is freezing action, what is this one though? This one's a still. The objects in the shot that are still are in focus. The blur is caused by whatever it is that's moving in the shot. In this case, it's her. She's moving. She's the one jumping up and down. How is this captured differently from how you captured freezing action? This is still blur. You got to think of your shutter. First of all, still blur. If something is blurry in the shot, that's the thing that's moving. What shutter speed do you think she would be in order for something like that to happen? Would it be a fast shutter speed or a slow shutter speed? Hopefully you picked a slower shutter speed. The slower your shutter speed, let's say 1/30th of a second, that's not going to necessarily freeze someone jumping up and down, right? So, in fact, this may be several jumps. That's from what I'm guessing, because if you guys did night photography, some of your exposures were going to be like 5 seconds, right? So she probably had it on tripod, put it on 5 seconds, and just kept jumping up and down for 5 seconds. That's why you got this kind of repeat motion there. But as different as this shot is from the rest, it still belongs in this series. Here she is again, completely different location, different outfit. She looks very different here, and we don't even see the ground in this one. Like she really is just flying through the air. So the composition is so different here, where we don't even see Earth. She's just truly flying. Here we have one low to the ground, and this one, it's not as crisp as Frozen, and that I'm suspecting because everything else was pretty much frozen in time. I'm guessing she may have done a little bit of a still blur, but maybe not as slow, but maybe something in between, maybe a 60th of a second, just to give us this little blur and to give us this movement of the train. Because if she shot this really high shutter speed, that train in the background probably would have been frozen still, depending on how fast it was going, right? Some of you were able to freeze cars um, while they were driving right in front of you, right? They looked like they were parked, but I know for a fact they were driving because they were right in the middle of the road and it was a green light, right? So if you had a really fast shutter speed, you could actually freeze a car, and you could potentially freeze a train. But I think she made a choice to go a little slower than what she would normally shoot, just so she can give us this frozen. I'm sorry, this sort of blurred train effect a little bit. I want you to see this picture. Like, where's Waldo? Where's Natsumi in this picture? I can't help but when I see this picture, I kind of cringe a little bit and feel a little awkward for the people around her, because this is a gallery somewhere, and she's just jumping up and down while the camera's perched on a balcony somewhere, and these unsuspecting viewers are just looking at the art and some woman in front of them jumping up and down randomly. You and I know that what she's doing, but they're not in on it. So I gotta think that they must feel that maybe she must be a performance artist. That's part of the work. I don't know. To me, I feel it's just so I feel so uncomfortable looking at this shot, but I think it's brilliant at the same time. And then there's also timing and location. I mean, for her to get this, and this area is completely clear, and no one interrupting the shot. I think that's amazing. Now, how does she do all this? I said they're self portraits. Well, think about how you would do this yourself, right? Maybe just take it in the most simplest terms. You want her to do this not in this complicated situation. Maybe in a place that's less populated, in somewhere right in front of your house or apartment, with natural daylight. All you're doing essentially is capturing an action shot, but it's of yourself. It's a self portrait. So you think about what you need to do for an action shot, and again, freezing action, higher shutter speed, right? Um, I think the hardest part now is because you know how to take an action shot, a freezing action shot. It's how do you focus yourself, a self portrait, right? So one technique that you could do would be to wherever you have your tripod there, you pre-expose. You're getting like you put 1/500th of a second, and then you put your ISO maybe a little higher, so that way you can get a high shutter speed, and maybe you adjust your aperture accordingly. Okay, then you take your camera off the tripod, and then you stand where you're about to take a picture, and then you turn around and you focus on your tripod, right? So in theory, you are actually focusing on at the same distance. So you're standing where you're going to be jumping up and down, where the action is going to happen, and you're focusing from that standpoint at your tripod. And in theory, that's the same distance, because when you put the camera back on the tripod, you don't refocus anymore. You leave it there. You put it on a self timer, and then you jump, right? So your self timers only take one shot, and so if you have to you have to time it right. You could buy a remote out there that will continuously shoot every few seconds. That way you don't have to keep going back and forth and setting the timer. So I think she may have had that just for convenience. It's gonna fire every 2 seconds or every second, and she'll just keep jumping up and down for a few seconds, and then she'll review her images. So you can get like a remote control, a wireless remote, to trigger your camera to fire every few seconds to do something like that. That's the same remote you would use for time-lapse photography, by the way. It's the same concept. Time-lapse photography is taking a picture every few seconds or so of the same scene, and you do that for like a whole hour, maybe when it's almost sunset, and you see the changing of the day, from bright to getting dark. If you do it close to sunset, you probably only need like 15-20 minutes of time-lapse photography, and you'll get a really dramatic change. But the idea is shooting a shot every few seconds. Okay, so going back to the series, these all belong together, but they all look so different in terms of location, lighting, composition, point of view. Look, the point of view here is on the second floor. This one is from the level of a child, really long, really low to the ground. they're all over the place, but yet it's such a strong idea. It's her levitating, and it's very simple, but yet effective. So, going back to the idea of the series, um, other examples of photo series are like a story or negative. A narrative, an event. Um, it doesn't necessarily have to have a formal beginning and ending. It could be just some sort of event. That's a series. It could be a phase or certain moments, like when you think about weddings. They're even like the before the ceremony happens, when the two partners are sort of getting ready in their dressing rooms. That little moment before they actually go up to the ceremony, that's a little phase, or that series of images. If you were to be the photographer to photograph one of the wedding partners getting ready, that's a sort of like a series right there. And there's something called a day in the life, which we'll get into, and that is capturing someone's day, entire day, and that is the series, from, we could say, from morning to evening, right? Or it could be one of my former students had access to the Santa Monica Police Department because his brother was working there, and he was able to do like a ride along during one of his brother's shifts. So that was his day in the life assignment, where he followed a day in the life of his brother, who was a Santa Monica Police Department officer. So that's an example. Okay. So as I mentioned, in a wedding, it could be, any part of the wedding is a series, and the whole wedding itself is a series. It's an event. And the series could be about a place. Like if you said Los Angeles, well, it's a little too generic. You got to be specific about what place it is. Where in Los Angeles? Is it a neighborhood, or is it actually one, like the LA Public Library in downtown LA? I mean, that's a beautiful building, and you could photograph there for a couple hours at least, finding really cool parts of the building on the exterior and the interior. Okay. So those are just some examples of creating your own photo series, and that is it.